This is Roddy Clear's Irish Music Show.
KCLR.
Track number 6 from Catch That Moment from Blink, the best of, and Blink are my special guests in studio. We didn't. This is the first time since the programme came back on the air that we've done a special, and it was lads, it was yourselves. They were the subject of it. So you're stuck with it whether you like it or not. You sound really angry on that song. I always thought. Yeah, it's not my fault.
Screamed my brains out on that song.
But even lyrically, it's quite.
Yeah. I forget what that song's about. Oh no, I remember what that song's about. Got totally. It's because the whole song is it's all in the Sheriff Brady and the fourth. That song is about taking a job. Nobody would understand. You wouldn't get this from listening to it. That song is about taking a job and surrendering your ambitions and your dreams. That's what that song is about. It was because at the time that we did all that stuff, I had been selling stationery and office equipment. I'm good at it too. And great stories. You should do a special with me, Roddy. Actually,
stationery. Headed notepaper.
Yeah, it's shocking. Like we'd be around touring places and we'd walk past the stationery shop and we'd have to go, you just have to write off an hour of your life. Check this out, Pritt Stick on this new thing. I'm like, oh, seriously, Dermot.
In fairness, I think I was one of the first people to sell Pritt Sticks. But that song actually was about everybody told me. My boss, I started working when I was 16, right? And this guy I worked for, it wasn't a nice fella, but he brought me out to lunch one day when I was 20, okay? 20 years of age, okay? And he sits me down and gives me a... Yeah, I just knew there was something coming, you know? And he goes, right, this music lark, you know, so... is it out of your system yet? I was like, what? And his whole buzz was, because I was very good at selling stationery, I'd always hit me targets and increase new targets. I just loved it. But I obviously wanted to be in a band more, and every penny I got I spent on strings. But anyway, this whole thing became a real issue. So later on, somebody else I knew actually did the thing. I started to disrespect people who didn't follow their dreams in a kind of overly arrogant kind of way, in fairness. But that song is about people who just jack it in long before they should. And that's the Sheriff Brady and a 4-foot lady, happy with a little baby. And it's I just wrote it at the time. I was in a bad mood, but I love singing that song because I get the screaming brains, and I'm physically able to do it still, which is a bonus.
When we we did that on, I think it was on the Late Late Show, and Barry's local parish priest, who didn't really realise that Barry was one of his parishioners, actually his sermon that Sunday was about, I saw this fella on the Late Late Show last Friday.
I was reading about that, yeah,
and actually he had it written out on the pamphlet and the picture of Dermot, and it was like singing "It's Not My Fault." Well, everything is, you know, you can't just say it's not my fault.
Yeah. Didn't you have another priest had a go at you as well over Is God Really Groovy?
That was the same one, because he had the title of the thing was "Is Blink Really Groovy?" And either he was a really cool priest, or that was an accident that happened. But "Is Blink Really Groovy?" and a hand-drawn picture of me.
That's right. Slightly worrying.
Shouting my head off. But the real thing about that was that one that was played on RTE. Whatever happened, there was a bit of an accident in the sound reproduction in RTE that night, and the song was basically bass, drums, and me screaming my head off. But the bass was cut out, so it was just drums and me screaming my head off. And
it wasn't one of our.
The priest was right.
There's a text in that says, Blink, great band, but back in the day they stole our drummer. Best wishes for the upcoming gig. Please say hello to your biggest fan, Noel Brady.
Noel Brady.
Yeah. You know, what's that? Still your drummer?
Barry was in the Back to Basics. So hello to all the Bradys. You can have him back now.
He's done his worth. Are you looking forward to the gig, guys? I mean, is it something that you know? Yeah. First of all, how? Okay, so the 20th anniversary of the release of A Map of the Universe, but the gig itself, and just, I won't say reunion, that's not the right word, but just doing what you're doing now, was it something that you that was a spur of the moment, or had you been working up towards it?
Threatening to do this.
Yeah, I think it was on the cards, and like we probably should have started rehearsing more than a couple of weeks ago. Anyway,
but you seem to be a kind of band who do things on the spur of the moment anyway, so probably will work from that point of view.
Well,
you know,
you'd like to think, wouldn't you?
No, but just playing the songs again is just like really refreshing and enjoyable. Like, you know, and you know, there's no pressure on us to go out and tour or do more gigs. It is just kind of playing the songs and learning how to play them again, and then doing a show like at the end of it, like, you know. So we'll have to do more, basically.
Yeah, it is enjoyable though, you know. And even kind of back in the day, sometimes you'd find yourself, you'd be arguing your corner, you know, really strongly, and there was always an air of aggression in the room when you were and you were always rehearsing to write a song or to we're going on tour,
whereas this defending time around, your guitar chord,
or defending, you know. And whereas now it's like, I don't really like that. I was like, oh, okay.
Are you more chilled about the whole thing now nowadays? With the benefit of hindsight, I suppose.
Yeah,
but you've been there, you've done it, you've travelled an awful lot with. I mean, Blink gave you a good life for a long time. Is that fair?
It gave us
an interesting life.
Well, our thing
interesting,
is, we everything happened. What we say is best holiday ever.
Yeah,
that's just because you know we done things like I never would have done any of the stuff. Never would have been to places in America or England or France, or if it hadn't been for the band. I mean, I would have just went on some sort of holidays, I'm sure, somewhere. But like we got really just like we went to Niagara Falls 3 times.
From both sides,
you know.
Old hat at this stage.
Here's Niagara Falls again.
Again. Would you change anything?
One time that was kind of interesting.
Oh no, you see, that's where we were at. The lads all went to see Niagara Falls, and I stayed in the hotel room because I was bored, and I watched Ace Ventura, Pet Detective 3 times.
And you're alongside Niagara Falls, one of the great wonders.
I know, yeah.
Would you do it again? Is there anything you'd change? looking back, would you have approached it differently?
I think we should play bigger venues. We should have played Wembley more often, I think.
Probably would have sold more albums than tickets.
We should have made more albums. I think maybe you should have gone with the album every 2 years or something, maybe. And
yeah, but see, that wasn't the plan. That was because an awful lot of it came a particular time when an awful lot of this was kind of self-funded, and we were kind of pushing the boat out ourselves. So you go off and you do a great tour in America, and then you come back, and instead of going straight into writing or doing some other stuff, it'd be like, right, got to clear the credit card bill.
Yeah.
In the latter days,
six different jobs in bars and all the stuff. But even that in itself was interesting.
Yeah,
it's great.
Well, you did your solo stuff, Dermot. What about yourselves? What were you doing in the intern time? I know you said you never really went away, but you must have been doing something other than what you were doing with Blink.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I started doing sound engineering, and I was recording, myself and Dermot, another guy, have a studio up in Dublin, and I did a sound engine there for a while, and I was doing other bits of music. But to be honest, nothing. I never really had the passion once of doing anything else that I was doing with Blink. So I mean, I'm 9 to 5 job now, Yeah,
but did you want to stay in the industry?
I personally did, but I never got involved in anything that really kind of that motivated me as much as Blink.
It's just not. It's not as magic to be.
No, true. And in fairness, there is like Dermot's who's somebody who can write a song from start to finish, whereas I was always. And probably the same with Brian as well. I was part of a unit. I might bring some chords in or a music idea.
But you were happy to go along with what Dermot was saying.
I don't write lyrics, number one, so I could never write finished songs. And I think that's one big difference between maybe you and maybe you say me and Brian. And I know Barry played drums.
Yeah, I just couldn't leave it alone. Yeah, kind of thing, if I wasn't doing that.
And are you quite happy with that? I mean, to let Dermot do what he does, and then you just do your own little bit of contributions along the way.
Yeah, I mean, the way we worked, it
worked for you.
We were always very, very happy. Obviously, look, to be, times of murder and mayhem. But generally, I mean, we're all very good friends.
It was a very democratic setup that we had. I mean, if someone didn't like something, I mean, it wasn't even necessarily put to the vote, but sometimes it did go to the vote, and when you're like fighting your corner, it wasn't always about who had the best idea. It was always who had the best reference or the best argument. And
totally. Yeah.
Sometimes you could say, "Oh, well, that's very such and such," and you're like, "Really?"
That happened only last week.
Only last week. Yeah. Actually, one of our slightly contentious issues, and somebody was able to jump in and say, "Well, it sounds a bit like this." It was like, oh, "Okay."
Yeah.
Actually, Roddy, I referenced Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson, I think, with the two boys were doing some sort of guitar lick together, and I was going, no, the dueling guitars thing, you need to be kind of playing around each other.
Yeah. Well, you have the template there. You had the template in it there.
Coming back from that reference.
But it'd be very, like, I mean, if I'm doing the stuff that I do outside of Blink, when I go back into working with the band, then I'm a member of the band again. Do you know? So it's not like they never told along any of my ideas, believe me.
Yeah,
so
for you.
Put up with me ideas more like.
Is the Dermot Lambert solo music far removed from Dermot who writes Blink music?
It's the exact same person. I thought there's the lyrical ideas and stuff, and how I would come up with ideas for songs and things like that is pretty much the same. As in, it would take me ages to figure out what I'm going to write about, and whereas, say, that album, the Tiny album, was a very personal album, but the fourth Blink album could have been a very personal. As a matter of fact, the third Blink album was a very personal album, But I know I'm planning on writing an album about Ireland, and I'm halfway through that, and that won't be. It'll be personal. I'm able to do stuff in that format that probably the lads wouldn't put up with, So
I mean, very much so. I mean, I think once you introduce the other three of us into anything, it's going to change drastically.
Yeah, I guess it is. It's a band situation.
It is a band situation. Whereas Dermot can't maybe go down avenues that he would like to go down on his own.
Dermot, would you find it harder writing as a solo project as opposed to writing as a band project, if you follow me? Which is easier for you? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, no, there's differences, like with the solo stuff, because I haven't got a band pushing me along. I'm less inclined to actually just do it, you know. But then when it comes to actually putting, there's 17 people played on Tiny. You know, like, Barry, in fairness, pushed me along, and my wife Clara pushed me along, and Clara ended up singing on, I think, all the album, actually, the entire album, and then there was my kids are on it, and my friend John McKinney played Bowron, and then we took that and resampled. I just brought people in. It's just, and then there's a guy called James Ahern, and I wanted to get some guitar bits, but I was sick of listening to the sound of my own stuff. So I said to James, "Can you come in and do that?" And he just, whatever first take he did, I took that, and things like that, you know. It took 2 years or something, like 3 years even, to kind of, because I wasn't sure I even wanted to do this. And then it was, when I came to release it, I was thinking, oh God, I'm going to get slagged now.
But I suppose once you got going, you had to kind of see it through, I guess.
Yeah. I was very surprised when it finally actually happened.
Yeah, it did very well. I remember. I meant to bring it in maybe this evening and play a track from it, but there you go. Let's go back to the best of compilation and Catch That Moment and Fundamentally Lovable Creature. This is another one that you've remixed, remastered, just worked a little bit on.
This is a remaster. We've got a guy called Darren O'Reilly who what Darren did was he got the bottom end to any music nerds out there, he basically split the bottom and the top, and the top is mastered stereo, and the bottom is mastered, the whole bottom end is mastered sort of mono. And this was a big mistake apparently that they made when they were remastering loads of the Beatles stuff, is that they mastered the Beatles stuff stereo on the bottom as well, but the whole Beatles catalogue was recorded mono.
As it was,
I'm not exactly 100% certain of my facts here, but basically once Darren explained all this to me, and then our stuff, we would have been very conscious always of bottom end, but Jesus, when he played me, especially this song, Fundamentally Lovable Creature, which, by the way, I think should be the first song on the live set. But yeah,
can we have a fight about this one off air?
But the bass in this song is just like, holy God, you know, and with the remastering of it, he captured it really well.
Okay, let's have a listen.
So
and Fundamentally Lovable Creature 20 years ago. And so you happy with the way that sounds now?
I love it.
As opposed to the original?
I love the original as well. Do you know what it is? Half the time it depends what you put some of the stuff on. See, my CD player at home is really old, so everything I have sounds good on that anyway. But it's when you get some of the newer stuff and you put some of the newer or some of the older stuff onto newer gear. The older stuff is mastered for older gear. So basically it's catching up with all that. And then in the case of cello, we went a little bit mad and did some extra bits onto it and stuff.
Was it difficult for you to just decide which ones to redo?
Oh, yeah, we had a load of meetings about it. Like meetings, as in we had 2 meetings.
Sitting over a pint somewhere, the best way.
Yeah.
Pretty much, it was there's 19 songs including the radio edit of cello on that. So it's 18 songs. I think we only thought we'd do 15 or something like that, and we couldn't get it down. It was up over 20 or something like that. But they're our favourite songs. So it was just us going like, look, let's do this. We've never released a kind of a compilation where all the stuff is in the one place at the same time behaving itself. So let's just do it now, and we're all still alive, I suppose.
Did you get any kind of a shock when you decided to sit down and compile these 17, 18 tracks and realising, gosh, we did an awful lot of good stuff?
I think more so when we're actually rehearsing.
The rehearsing has been
it's real kind of, oh wow, actually, we really enjoy playing that still, and it still sounds really, really, really good, you know.
Are you in the process of writing that at the moment? Will there be new Blink material?
I don't know. I just we look at each other and go, there's a song like this. We see the thing. There's a couple of songs that were never properly released.
We have the one missing. Here's Your Chance.
Yeah.
Well, go on.
There's a song that, again, you probably wrote the chorus to, and we played live loads of times, but we never recorded. Never even did a demo. And that song could probably end up getting us into the studio to do some recording.
Would you like to go back and do new material, a whole lot of new material?
Yeah, well, I would, because I like recording anyway.
It's a great buzz writing a song. I mean, getting an idea together and finishing it off into like 3.5 minute long piece, it's probably one of the best buzzes you get from being in a band.
Are you expecting anything to happen? I mean, you have the gig coming up on at the end of the month, and what was it, 25th? Beyond that, what are you thinking? I mean, do you want to go back on the road, or is this just going to be a celebratory gig for the 20th anniversary of the release, yada yada yada? Are you even attempting to think beyond that?
We had a very clear chat actually about that, because when we started rehearsing, and basically it came to like, actually, why are we actually doing this? Do you know, like, what does people want from it? And so we went around each of us one by one, and really and truly, this is the 20th anniversary of Rapid Universe, so there's never going to be another 20th anniversary. So this is a bit like, our get off the pot, so we decided we were going to do that and play a gig, and then I was like, okay, well, what do you want from the gig? What do you want to happen? And given our experiences of gigs over the years, sometimes we've had some disastrous shows, and then we've had some amazing shows. So what we decided, and I think I'm right about this, we just want to do a brilliant Blink gig. See, Blink, in my opinion, was an amazing band at the start.
No, I won't argue with that.
And then somewhere along the way, we became this kind of survival outfit that just kept going, that didn't know when to stop.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think that's more noticed.
Could you say the same about a lot of Irish bands like that?
Yeah, but you could, of course, yeah. But it's not nice being in the second Blink. It was great being in the first Blink.
Yeah.
So the second Blink was tough. I mean, the good bits were great. Good gigs were great, but to get us onto the stage and to record and get songs there, took an awful lot of effort, and that takes its toll on your decisions that you make.
And of course, the years are passing by as well.
Yeah, of course,
you're not going to stay in your 20s all the time, and as you get that little older and your responsibilities, you're all family men, and I suppose all that comes into play as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I mean, that would beg the question: if you do decide to tour again, would that be just kind of localised to Ireland? Or would you be prepared, or would you be able to go further beyond if something magical happens that people really want to hear you again?
listen, if somebody wanted to give us 10 grand to get in a plane, it's just
okay, silly question, I guess.
that is the answer.
But I suppose, there's a chance of playing some small little venue in London. It's going to cost you X amount of money. Do we really want to go there again?
There might be someone there,
what's the we've played enough empty rooms.
Well, in fairness, actually, that's a very good point, because what I'm really looking forward to about the Button Factory is there's lots of lovely feedback coming in off the Blink Facebook page and the various different things like that, and there's pre-sale tickets as well, so we know there's people going to be at this, and we know that this is going to be, for some people certainly, it's going to be a big nostalgic kind of a thing, and I'm cool with that. That's grand. And then for other people, they're going to be looking forward to seeing the band. But the fact that we're enjoying playing the stuff just for that one-off event, so I certainly am planning anything beyond that. We're doing a little guest thing with a couple of weeks later
in the Piazza House. Talk about that. That's going to be an interesting night as well. We'll talk about that in a moment as well.
There's an actual show that we're in charge of, and we're putting it together, and that's we're saying to people, look, this is something we're doing. There's only one.
So it's kind of a wait and see situation, really, is to see what happens after that
Probably
date.
A little bit.
Okay, I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to play. I'm going to skip forward a little bit, because I'm not going to get the entire album.
Too much.
I don't mind that. I'm going to get another live track from you as well, if we can. I'm going to go with Billy. What's the story on this song then?
Billy was a huge song for us live in 1995, especially when we were doing all the American stuff. And the song, we recorded it. The subject matter of Billy was, I don't know, basically the song was about two friends, and one of the friends says to the other friend, it basically comes out and says, I'm gay, and also on top of that, by the way, I'm in love with you. Now this really happened. This is friends of ours, and that's what the song is about, because the other friend was a bit shocked and whatever, and then they had to deal with that.
Of course, this would have been at a time when that subject would have been a lot more shocking than it is now.
Sure.
Well, as a matter of fact, the song would actually seem a little bit naive now, actually. Do you know what I mean? But the song was great, and the recording of it was never quite finished. But with what we did with the mastering was, apparently there's all sorts of things wrong with it, but in the mastering we readjusted stuff back into where it's meant to go, and it's just the sentiment of the song, naive as it might seem now, is still a lovely sentiment, and I prefer to kind of refer to it as that Billy in this instance now is a girl. It makes more sense in my head,
Okay.
So and it's just a great song to play as well.
Okay, we'll hear a song called Billy from Blink after these.
Roddy Clare's Irish Music Show. 34 years supporting Irish acts.
a song called Billy, and it's from Blink, who are my guests in studio. We're doing a special on the band this week on the programme. Going to do one or two of these over the next number of months. Don't know who the next one's going to be. We'll just see who's coming back. Whatever. And the reason the guys are in and why we're doing the special is it's 20 years since the release of A Map of the Universe, and there's a new CD due for release as well, a best of compilation from which we're playing tracks on the programme. We're not going to get them all in, but we've got 11 of them in so far. No, we haven't got 11 of them in. We've got 7, 8, 9 of them in so far. We'll probably get 2 more. So I know we spoke kind of briefly there a moment ago, lads, about the gig coming up in the Button Factory, and then you have the Piata House, which will be that's in the Olympia on the 16th of November, I think it is. It's a Sunday.
Yes, it's Sunday.
Which is kind of a greatest hits of Ireland, the kind of a reeling in the years type thing. Which I mean, the nostalgia version, the nostalgia value of that is going to be quite huge for a lot of people. There'll be yourselves, Into Anua, Friends of Emmett, who are a new band, but Waterboys are in there as well. I'm just trying to think of.
The Brothers are in there, I think.
Yeah.
The Cactus World News playing.
Cactus World News.
Fountainhead.
Yeah, it was members from.
Members from.
So that'll be quite an interesting night. I mean, you look at bands like that, and you look at bands that have come before. We have all the crop of bands that are around at the moment in Dermot. I suppose you more so than the lads, perhaps. I don't know. Will be very aware of the current crop of bands that are out there, and even some that I mentioned to you don't know about, and that's just the way of it in this country. But back then, the crop of bands that were around, such as the ones we've mentioned, the rich vein of music that this country has produced and still continues to produce is quite astounding, isn't it?
There's a very, very high bar. You know, first of all, I have to correct when I said earlier on I don't like new music, and that's because I'm old. That's an ironic thing for someone in my position to say, considering that I've probably, God knows, many new artists I've worked with over the last few years. But it's what gets to the top is generally a complaint of mine these days, and it's the general things that are in place to make that happen. So, and that's why Facebook and the digital changeover and stuff hasn't, I believe, been helpful towards creativity. Having said that, the garage gigs which I run, which I still sort of base, if you see something on a stage, if you see a band, and I mentioned the Dark Lanes, a band I saw not too long ago, and you see that band and you just go, oh my God, they're brilliant. I don't have to look them up on Facebook. I'm actually looking at them. They're in front of me playing, so I'm not listening to an MP3. I'm not any of that stuff, and I see what's really happening. And whether or not that band transfer themselves into sort of general listening to the rest of the world, I don't know. But I see loads of great artists, but that's something I just had to kind of quantify. Is whether or not those great artists get through the shape of the music industry now. I believe is actually more difficult than it ever was. It doesn't mean that there's not great music being made.
Is live music still important? A band going up on stage and doing their thing, stagecraft, learning the stagecraft, or have they become too much, homogenized?
It is really important. What's happened though is that there's too much homogenization going on.
That's what I mean.
So a lot of bands who are probably there's a lot of laziness has become a massive new factor, whereas a lot of bands wouldn't be bothered in the old days having to go and do.
Yeah, you didn't have the internet pretty much back in the 90s.
Bands now, I get bands ringing me. I mean, we're the recording studio that we run, and bands ringing me. Oh, listen, we want to do an album, and they want to spend 200 quid and do an album. It's like, seriously, lads, cop on.
And there was.
I get a bit annoyed sometimes.
I did a good bit of engineering, and you did notice it with the advent of Pro Tools, and it was like bands coming in, and sometimes they were like, "Oh, just fix it on Pro Tools,"
Yeah, laziness again.
At the start, you're going, "Yeah, I can fix it in Pro Tools," and then after a while, it's like, no, play it.
I've often had the belief I'd rather hear a band live bad than recorded good, if you follow what I'm trying to say.
I completely agree with that.
I mean, and I always sometimes try to get people, my own kids, watch Live Aid. When you see somebody like Phil Collins and he hits a bum note every now and again, nobody bats an eyelid.
Oh, no.
Now you hit the bum note, people, oh, you're useless. It's so wrong. It's so wrong. I mean, Blink, when you started out, your ideals then, you would have come from that train of thought that you had to do your apprenticeship, you had to serve your time driving up and down the country. That doesn't really apply the same way anymore, does it?
But it should.
I know it should, but I don't think it does.
The thing is, it doesn't, because of Facebook and because of people think like, why should I have to go to Kilkenny and do a radio interview? You could just do it by Skype.
Yeah.
That's, you know, like, okay, if that's what you're. It's not how I am, and it's not. I don't think it's very respectful. And on top of that, if we were doing a gig in Kilkenny, you know, like if people in Kilkenny wanted to see us and there was enough of them, and we come and do a gig. Do you know what I mean? There's a.
But surely that's still
Yeah, but the thing is, it's simply not addressed anymore, and I can see this from just because in my area of work, it's just like the. Loads and loads of venues in Dublin city centre now, and they put bands on, and the venue owners don't care if the bands are good, bad and different. Now that's not necessarily a new thing, because the venue owners are just trying to sell drink, and that's fair enough, and that's a business, but they just lash them on. And then I run a thing where it's a bit more, the bands themselves have to be a little bit more ambitious, and I create kind of if you like, blockages to lazy bands, as in I'm all about helping bands who want to help themselves, but I'm not like St. Dermot, and like every like bunch of guys gets together and wants to be famous in 2 days' time. That's not my job. Back in the 80s, we used to have to stick up posters for gigs.
Yourselves.
Yeah. Out in the van in the middle of the night. And you know what? You know, at the risk of sounding like some other old codger saying, "Oh, this is the way it had to be," it is actually still the way it has to be. Like, if you want people to know about your music, I'll go and tell them. Or don't play it.
But did they not just tell them via Facebook now?
Yeah, but no one's listening on Facebook. You know, people have to start copping onto this. Like 10,500 Facebook fans. No, you haven't. You know, you haven't.
How many would actually watch
that
closely as well, as was another thing also.
They don't, you know.
Just, I want to kind of go back to the beginnings of the band as well. We kind of mentioned before we came on air, just to kind of just get this thing out of the way, the whole Blink 182 thing.
Yeah.
I know you didn't go to court on that, but I mean, there's, you know, it probably would have sounded a much better story if we said that you did and all the rest. So, but who was there first? You were there first as Blink. Yeah,
and
then Blink 182 came along.
Well, we had priority over the name in terms of, like, we had released something under the name, so I mean, they had been gigging, I think, in San Diego for a number of months, and we became aware of a band gigging in San Diego under the name Blink, and I think we just approached them and said, sorry, but like, we have the name. Yeah, it was all very kind of.
It was. In fairness, actually, yeah. I mean, look, I think they had something released, and we had something released, and actually, I think. We said to them, look, whoever has something released in the States first can hang on to the name. So we had actually we've been over to CMJ in 1990, whatever it was. So we kind of produced this CD, and
so you had the edge.
So we had the edge, and that was it. So they changed their name. We could have made them change their name, but we said no, hang on to the name and change it. And
we can't say what we really think, because we say what we really think, we'd be accused of being sour grapes.
Well, it's. I tell you what, I think it's hilarious. Like, I mean, that's so be it. They went off and sold their millions of records.
Yeah. Whatever happened to them?
But the lead singer guy was like, was moaning about it, like, you know. I remember, like, years later, I was working in a bar. I remember it was one Saturday night in the bar, and I was actually literally unblocking a urinal, and some bloke came down and said, "Oh, you're your man that was in Blink. I heard your man complain about you again." It was like, Jesus, you know.
But no, I suppose it's publicity anyway. Either way, whatever you look at it, you know. But it's all done, dusted. It's forgotten about.
No, you see, that for years. If you go on any of the Blink videos on YouTube, and you see these comments, and I swear, you get. After a while, you think you get thick-skinned, but then you read something. I was like, "Oh, you guys suck. Oh, you guys people know you because of Blink 182." I was like, "Oh, do you know what? If I actually used to like to meet all these people and punch them." Don't say it,
I saw some of the comments already. They're a bit choice.
But I mean, I do remember. I do remember one. We were doing a tour, actually, funny enough, with a band called Sam I Am, who actually Blink 182 had supported. They were actually a San Diego band as well. Like, you know, I remember Barry, actually, our drummer, used to wear a Blink 182 t-shirt and stuff. You know.
Yeah.
But I remember doing a couple of gigs, and literally there was these like bunch of kids at the start, you know, and they were literally standing at the start of the gig, you know, just giving us the fingers at the front of the stage, you know,
with their Blink 182 t-shirts on.
But enough of the times I go, "Hey, you guys aren't bad."
And they had to admit that then as well. Actually, I heard those guys Blink. They're actually quite good. I want to try and get two more in. We're running rapidly out of time. What have I got lined up? Number 15, which is Would You Kill for Love? We kind of spoke about this one a little bit earlier on as well. Here's Blink.
junkie. Nighttime junkie. Disco zombie. Nighttime junkie.
Song called Would You Kill for Love, taken from a new compilation, Best of Blink. Catch that moment. Looking forward to that going on release, lads. That's a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, 24. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah, Exira, as somebody used to say many years ago. We are at the end pretty much of the programme. We've got time for one more perhaps, just to squeeze in. I just want it remains to me to say thanks to the three of you for first of all taking the time to travel down and having the chat for the last couple of hours. It's been interesting. I can't believe the 2 hours have flown past so fast, and look forward to seeing how that gig goes for you, and whatever will happen in the time after that. It will be interesting to see. Will there even be at least a single?
I think that there should be a single. God, we better release it.
We'll start making some
pick a single.
decisions here.
Do we have to write another song?
No.
Must be a new one then.
Well, we can't release couldn't be a single, and
Here's your chance, I'm telling you, that's the one.
No, maybe the first song will be Give It a Bunk. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
whatever
pressure.
turns out. 17 is what I'm lining up here. So the album Catch That Moment, I presume you'll be able to get it at the gig, and it'll be available download and all the usual record shops.
It's on pre-sale on iTunes right now, actually.
And it's there.
As a matter of fact, if people were to go on and pre-order it now, then on the day of release they'll get it into their phone. And if 500 million people could do this,
it's been done.
We get you too, would we?
Yeah. It's been done, lads. You know.
I don't know. I have 500 million Facebook friends.
Yeah.
Lads, thanks very much indeed. It's Blink, my special guest for the last 2 hours, and watch out. The 25th is the gig in the Button Factory in Dublin. 24th is the release of the album, and welcome back. Even though you've never been away.
Yeah, it's great, and thanks for having us. It's a lovely idea, and it's great. Thank you very much.
And Separation 20 we're going to finish, or I'm calling it Separation 20 because this is another one of those songs that has been remastered.
This is the band's collective favourite song. This is one where all four of us go, you know what, cello's deadly and all the rest of it, but this is just privately, this is the first time on radio ever. Anywhere that this is like being played. It's 20 years old, so there you go, Roddy. Thanks.
Another first.
Yeah.
There you go.
Dermot, Brian, Robbie, thanks a million. Collectively known as Blink, and of course Barry, he may be listening in. Thanks very much for coming for the last 2 hours.
Thank you.
A mildly embarrassing tale of woe, not a pretty sight, but a nice way to go. There's Christmas crackers with your name inside. If you're free, why don't you sing a free song? just color, a blur to me, but maybe not to others. I don't look through now, I'm afraid to see. If you're free, why don't you sing a free song?
Roddy Clare's Irish Music Show. Sunday nights from 7 to 10.